Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone's doing wonderful out there on the interwebs. I'm Don Cramer with the Cramer Group at Urban Nest Realty. Welcome to the Tuesday edition, episode 69 of Coffee with Cramer and Colleen. Colleen Schaefer, my partner, sends her best. She's out doing that real estate thing today. I'm going to catch up with her on a couple of listings. However, as you know, this show is dedicated to real estate, lifestyle, and community here in our humble little valley of Las Vegas, Nevada. And anyway, for those that tune in today, do us a big favor, hit the like button and also comment. But we are excited because we have a very special guest today. And her resume reads like the who's who of Las Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. And her name is Gina Bonigiovi. And Gina is the managing partner of the Bongiovi Law Firm, a boutique law firm providing on-demand counsel to businesses of all sizes. And I've known Gina for a long time through mutual friends and colleagues through the legal community. And it's awesome to have Gina on because she is a great resource for people and businesses in this ever-changing, as she said a little bit, Barbie living in a Barbie world. Well, we're living in a COVID world, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to kind of go through a lot of things and just give you a little background on Gina. She originally started in marketing and was in need of legal advice. And as you know, couldn't find an attorney. Why did I get into real estate? Need to sell my house. So kind of like paths. And then so she became an attorney here in Las Vegas and graduate of the Boyd School of Law and the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and has been a practicing attorney for over 10 years now. Isn't that right, Gina?
13.
13 years.
So yes, technically over 10.
Exactly. And so in addition to Gina, she helps with many organizations, both in business development, but also some awesome, wonderful philanthropy events. She is a dog lover extraordinaire, and she's been involved in several nonprofits, including Dress for Success, Vegas Shepherd Rescue, Working Canine Rescue, and has served on the Alumni Association Board of UNLV, former chair of Vegas Young Professionals Advisory Council, and she's on the Dean Advisory Board, again, at the Lee Business School and UNLV Honors College, and Vegas Chamber, the Vegas Chamber of Commerce Board of Trustees as chair-elect. She's also been honored as a Woman of Distinction by NABO and is recognized as a rising star of business in the Las Vegas Business Press. She has a resume and a diverse background that is extremely proud to have her on today. And thank you, Gina, for being on. But my favorite title of yours, and I'm hoping I pronounce this right because I don't have any Italian in me, but she is your corporate concierge.
It's a good job.
Hopefully I'm close enough there.
Close enough.
So make sure you leave the cannolis, but pick up the phone and call Gina for all business matters. So Gina, cheers to you today. Welcome.
Cheers. I'm totally stealing that. Take the cannolis, pick up the phone.
Perfect. Exactly. Yeah, that's the new and it's funny because when I and I love how you look at that and embrace that as that sage counsel to the business leader, and I was asked a while back by somebody that was taking over my position I was leaving years ago in the golf industry, and they asked me, how do you find your management style? I said, well, it's a kind of a combination of The Godfather and Patton.
Which can be a good thing or a very scary thing.
Exactly. The only thing I know is Francis Ford Coppola was involved in both movies. And,
sensing a theme.
Exactly. So Gina, for people that are tuning in today, do us a big favor. Explain to people your practice and how you're probably a little different than some maybe of the traditional business law firms out there.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I started the law firm because I had a small business myself, and couldn't find anybody who was, competent and affordable and really working in the space. And I even asked an attorney who had been practicing here for many years for a referral to another attorney. I said, here's my situation. And he referred me to the wrong attorney. It was sort of like going to a podiatrist with a toothache. And so I thought, if there's nobody, if I, having grown up here, knowing an attorney who also grew up here, who'd been practicing, asking that question, I should have really landed with the right person, and I didn't. So I started calling around, and it became clear that there weren't really very many attorneys that were serving the small business market, which I started in 2008. If you count backwards, 13 from 2007, 2008, which was about the bottom of the recession. People were starting businesses out of necessity. So one of the things that I experienced as a business owner going and trying to find legal advice is like, I don't know how to budget for an hourly rate, for example. So when I started the firm, I started charging flat fees, and we continue that to this day. We charge flat fees wherever we can. Hourly billing is sort of a last resort because nobody can budget for it. And then we have different packages and monthly retainers, and we try to be very flexible and even more importantly, transparent about what the fees are. And so it really helps our clients budget for our services and be able to know what it's going to cost, and incentivize us to be more efficient and make sure that we're providing the service, because I won't go on my tangent or my rant about this, but hourly billing breeds inefficiency, and it's just the way everything has been done so archaically. And as one of the two oldest professions in the world, the legal profession is not going to change anytime soon.
No, that is for sure. And it's interesting how you, like you said, you moved to a more flat fee project-based model, and right during the Great Recession, and that that makes it very interesting because businesses, even starting from their infancy, need legal support. And like you said, that sort of meter running type of approach, no offense to people in law before, but it was a very traditional model that made it kind of difficult for small businesses to sort of feel like, okay, they need to really embrace legal services and try to go off on their own.
Yeah, and I mean, in fairness, I get why it's happening. I'm working with a CFO right now to try to figure out what the next step is in growing my firm. And really, without that, okay, we bill this amount per hour, and this is what our overhead is, and so this is our margin, that quote unquote simple equation, it's really difficult to be able to look at the metrics to grow, which is why it's so hard to move away from that hourly billing model. But we have just railed against it because we don't spend a whole lot of time on this earth, and I don't want to track it in 6-minute increments.
I love that. And Gina, what is your what's a common client that you're bringing on board right now?
Gosh, it kind of runs the gamut. So we have some clients who are in food service, for example, who have several locations, one of whom is on the Las Vegas Strip. We've got some clients in retail. We have some physician clients. We've got other professional service clients. Like we've got a pretty sizable CPA firm that is actually a client of ours. Trying to think of who else that's on my list right now. I've got a woman who's got a business she's selling it. We've had car dealerships, dental practices. I'm trying to think of an industry that we haven't really dealt with, but it kind of runs the gamut.
So a diverse range of small, medium businesses, because you talk about retail, you talk about professional services, automotive industry, various things. I mean that run, that stretch through the fabric of our economy. Now, for better or worse, a lot of times when they bring an attorney in or bring yourself in, usually because there's a problem. How do you work, or when you're engaging with these, one of the best ways to do it with your program and with your business model and such, to get ahead of the curve, to minimize it, because really ultimately it's about minimizing risk and preparing yourself for your business to go forward.
Yeah, so a lot of attorneys, so we have a big challenge in educating business owners as to why they would involve an attorney at the very beginning, yes, in a proactive sense rather than a reactive sense. So if you If you are getting ready to file bankruptcy, if you're filing for divorce, if you get a DUI, like the first person you call practically is your attorney, but not so when you start a business. So our challenge is educating business owners on how we can be preventive. So we like to think of ourselves as like, we're your personal trainer and your gym membership that keeps you out of open heart surgery down the road, because working in the, reactive kind of like, back of the ambulance kind of, it's you never get that, like it's a lesser result. It's a more expensive yet, less valuable result. And really the only people in that equation that get rich are the attorneys. And I can say that because that's not even work I do. So so we try to get out ahead of things. Like I just talked to a woman today who's got a couple of people as 1099 contractors and a couple of people as employees, but they're all doing the same things. And I said, well, what justification do you have to classify them differently? And she said, well, one wants to be an employee because he wants to buy a house and he wants to be able to show W-2 pay stubs. And the other just wants to be a 1099. And I said, well, you have to understand that the classification of your workers is not a worker preference. It's based on what they're doing. And that came as a big surprise to her. And she was like, oh, I didn't even know that. So, it's educating them. And luckily she was referred by her financial advisor who identified, your employees are your biggest liability. So you need to get this stuff tied up and call Gina. And so you can make sure that you're heading problems off.
Exactly. And that's the key, because people are trying, they're trying to operate their business and hopefully they're good at what they do, but this is where they need to bring you in as that legal resource to figure out, okay, well, what is the best way to structure and operate your business, like you said, proactively, so you don't have to go into open heart surgery. That, okay, in this case, it could result in a employment, and not just maybe a problem between the employer, but we're talking also with regards to regulatory agencies and such.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I have a couple horror stories about that just popped into my head.
Well, for that one, we'll have you on our future show. What we're thinking about the name of Cocktails with Cramer.
Yeah, that's definitely a cocktail justification.
Exactly. And so, your practice was started in what was pretty much unusual times, the Great Recession, our economy falling apart, housing, abandonment, just everything not looking very good, sort of circa 2008, 9, 10, and such. And you went through that. You've grown your practice. You have you have a team you're building. Your representation is both not just in Las Vegas. We recently met. You were saying you were doing some stuff up in Reno, so that's great for businesses that are needing both presence. Now we have this little thing called COVID-19 because the Great Recession just wasn't enough.
Yeah. Just when you think you get back up, dust yourself off, and bam, global pandemic.
Exactly, global pandemic. June, I think there was a bear with nunchucks was on somebody's bingo card.
Yeah, murder hornets.
Murder hornets, mountain lions in Summerlin.
Oh, that's right, mountain lions in Summerlin.
Yeah, it was just right down the street. I think he was in my neighbor's pool. So,
who knew cats could swim?
Who knew cats could swim? Hey, it's hot out.
He's out on a pool float with like a cocktail with an umbrella.
Well, I guarantee
I'm already
that
delirious.
mountain lion, he was walking around. He's like, yeah, this place is clean. It's neat. There's walking trails. There's places for me to land. Oh, there's pools.
There's pools. Somebody started a quarantine garden. I could have fresh tomatoes.
Yeah. This mountain lion, they put him back in the mountains. He's telling the other mountain lions, going, okay, we got this all wrong. We're going to move.
You're never going to believe what I saw in Summerlin.
Exactly. Oop! I think there's somebody that wasn't really happy about hearing a kitty being talked about.
Yeah.
So Gina, in with COVID, what I know you started part of your website. You had some great content on COVID. I know you were helping businesses through some of the programs, PPP, EIDL, and such. Now that we're a few months into this, and Nevada's kind of riding the fine line on phase 2 right now.
Yeah.
What are the questions, or what is the thinking on businesses or advice or topics you're speaking to in our current COVID world?
So regarding, I spent a lot of time trying to stay abreast of the changes that were happening in the PPP program and the EIDL program. So much so that my partner kind of took me aside one day and said, have you done any work for like our actual clients? I was like, no, I'm just like, mission focused on making sure everybody understands all these things, all these changes. And then it became like too much really to keep up on. So those programs so there's a little bit of time left to apply for PPP to the extent you can find a bank who will work with you. EIDL is still happening, but that's truly a loan. So there's lots of misconceptions about what's forgivable and what's not. I actually did apply for forgiveness for my PPP loan last week, only to realize that the SBA had not yet come out with its final rules. So there have been, I think, 19 interim final rules that the SBA has, or the U.S. Treasury has come out with. So I posted the meme with Inigo Montoya where it says you're using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means when they say final, because it's not final, and it never seems to be final. So those are kind of not necessarily the biggest thing now. So the biggest thing now seems to be businesses being concerned about whether they can open, how they can reopen. And the big conversation, and what I would really encourage all your business owner listeners or viewers to pay very close attention to, is liability as it concerns businesses that are reopening. So California, which we often follow for better or worse, their legislation, California recently passed legislation that if an employee who is working in a business that has reopened contracts COVID, there is what's called a rebuttable presumption that they contracted that at work, and it becomes a workers' compensation issue and potentially additional business liability to the employer. The problem there is that employers don't control the employees but for the 8 or 9 hours they're at work. So they don't control whether they go to a barbecue over the weekend or go to a COVID party, which apparently is a thing mostly in the South, I guess. Like Alabama, people are going to COVID parties. Like they would take their kids to chickenpox parties, but it's like totally not the same thing.
Exactly. And I spoke to a relative where I'm starting to question the University of Alabama's accreditation.
Oh no. Yeah. So the problem is now that the businesses are thinking, okay, well, if I don't have control over my employees for 2/3 of their time, but if they contract COVID, if they get diagnosed with COVID, then it's going to be on me. They're just probably not going to reopen, which then compromises the economy. The whole reason we're even reopening is to avoid further damage to the economy. So part of what we were worried about with the special session that was called last week was that we were going to talk about this limited, so they're calling it kind of limited liability for businesses. So of course, you have people on one side of the equation, like the Culinary Union, different, progressive groups that are interested in making sure that there is no limit to the liability that business owners would have, so that if an employee does go back to work and they do get sick, and, they can sue that business owner for, those damages. And business owners and, business groups like the chamber and others are like, okay, well, we have to find some sort of happy medium. So to the business owners that you're dealing with, and especially those who have employees, it's very important to pay close attention. So we've heard that there's another special session that's coming up, and that's when they may consider this limited liability. And if they don't consider it during a subsequent special session, it will almost definitely be in next year's legislative session, which will start first thing, like right off the bat in January 2021. So it's important to stay informed. It's important to be aware, make sure that you know who your legislators are and know where they stand on things. Because what I learned, I've gotten really involved on the government affairs side in my role with the chamber. And what I've learned is there are so many legislators that go in and they are kind of like finding their footing for the first couple of years, and they go in on a platform. They're like, I want to improve education, but they don't know about mining, and they don't know about retail, and they don't know about hospitality and all of these other things. So they're a little bit at the mercy of the lobbyists that are up there to kind of educate them on here are the things that that you need to be concerned of. These are the unintended consequences of this legislation, because it's not just like raising minimum wage doesn't happen in a vacuum. Raising minimum wage means that, businesses have to cut costs somewhere else. And, there's lots of education. I could talk for days on this, but I'm going to shut up.
No. Yeah, I mean, like you said, we could have a conversation on this for days, and we're going to go right from our coffee to, scotch and water. And you bring up the situation with the legislatures. I mean, we can roll back about the whole issue where we're kind of started with term limits, and I think things have sort of settled out a little bit because we've dealt with limited term senators and assembly persons for a few cycles now, so they're starting to figure it out. But usually, like you said, the first session or first couple of years, you're trying to figure out where the restrooms are.
Yeah.
And like
it's a big process too, and it's not like in social, fifth grade social studies does not, or senior year civics does not prepare you for the different committees and how things work and how they get in session, out of session, and it's a fascinating thing that there are professionals who know how it works and they make a living at it, which leads you to believe that there's something more complicated than just somebody who with a good heart wants to go up and make some change. It's so much more involved than that.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And then you start thinking, well, why are those people lifers? Well, I mean, does it become a little bit of a career? Yes. But is it one of those that, okay, well, maybe they're just as up to speed as a lobbyist working with a newbie, and we're not sure what that end result may be. So with regards to, and you bring up some great points, because we're kind of balancing, it's a balance of liability and responsibility here in COVID. I mean, this is front and foremost, and we're dealing with something that's, we kind of didn't, they speak of COVID as the flu, and we don't really have liability issues with the flu, with influenza, but now it's one of those. You've got camps that say, okay, it's not serious enough, but at the same time, we need to have you sign some waivers. And then the other side says, okay, hey, look, you want us to sign these waivers. Somebody gets sick, somebody gets ill. It's costly. It's a major economic impact. I mean, and unfortunately, there is a higher mortality rate to this than influenza. So we're kind of like in this sort of tweener state to sort of hopefully mesh together some responsible legislation. And so with regards to that, how do you see that being done prior to the election? Because this is going to be a hot button issue for the next 90 days.
Yeah, I mean, the danger, even when you have a legislative session that lasts, a regular legislative session, it's very difficult to get the way you termed it, responsible legislation, because you've got all the different tensions, different, the groups that want things to be written a certain way. And then even the legislation that I've seen come out of the regular legislative session can be fraught with ambiguity. And so when we're talking about it coming out in a special session, which is an highly dramatically compressed, accelerated version of the regular legislative session, it becomes quite concerning, because even, the bill draft reviews that a lot of the parties would, or the, sponsors would be introducing were in the works for next January, like this past January. And so now we've interrupted all of that, and we're trying to create all of this legislation for COVID, and there's not really good models out there, because we also haven't had the opportunity to see what that legislation does on the back end, what those unintended consequences are. And we can speculate, if we have this limited liability, if it becomes unlimited liability for business owners, if their employees contract COVID and it comes back as liability to the business owners are going to be like, screw this, I'd rather just not open. And then what does that do to the economy, and what does that do to jobs, and what does that do to people's ability to afford housing, and what does all of those, secondary and tertiary consequences. So we haven't really had the opportunity to see what's going to happen and say, hey, look at what they did in Washington, and we don't want to repeat that mistake. So that's what kind of makes it really scary, is making sure that the people are understanding and they're listening. And the biggest concern that we had in the special session that was last week is like nobody was allowed in the building.
Right.
So the conversations that the lobbyists would traditionally be able to have with the legislators and say, hey, here are the concerns that we have from our perspective, so you can take it all into consideration, they couldn't have. Everybody was in their little bubble, in their little offices, and it's just a whole new world, and it is still bizarre. And there are still moments where I'm like, I still can't believe this is happening. You know, I remember early on when I had lunch with somebody, it was, I think, a week and a half before we actually went into quarantine, and he was a very smart guy, one of my fellow board members on the chamber board. And he said, yeah, you know, they should just put us into quarantine for 60 days and get it over with, because it's going to happen. And I looked at him like he was insane and was wearing a tinfoil hat. And I was like, okay, you're Ivy League educated, but you're not that smart. And here we are. Like, he was probably right. So we're all in this new, you know, way of trying to do things we don't have. There's no example. There's no best practice. We're all just doing the best we can with the information we have, and there's no guidance. And that's why it's either the worst or best thing to be an attorney at this point in time, or any advisors. You don't know, you know, even in real estate, like, is this a good time to buy or a good time to sell? Well, interest rates are low, but what's going to happen to the housing market? Is it going to crash? Is it going to boom? Like, nobody knows anything.
Well,
So,
you know, absolutely. And I'm, you know, kind of like, you know, you were probably similar in thinking, going, okay, I like to kind of have my knowns pretty well figured out, whether they're good knowns or bad, you know, they're good or bad.
right.
At least you know, okay, which ones you can engage with and which ones you want to maybe maneuver around, and kind of manage your risk accordingly. But, you know, we seem to be sort of, you know, as weird as it is, maybe there's sometimes I feel like, okay, lockdown, was it bad? Yeah. But at least I kind of knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, okay, how, you know, when does this come to an end? Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of weird that way. And so with regards, you know, the special session that was recently completed, I mean, they definitely moved a lot quicker than I was expecting. And, you know, I guess the one thing they didn't do was raise taxes. Any sort of thoughts on what was passed recently? I mean, you know, I know it's almost one of those, it's a no-win scenario.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't get done as much as they wanted to, because I think somebody in the building was diagnosed on Saturday. I think it was Saturday, so it went from like Wednesday to Saturday or something like that. So they didn't have as much time as they thought they would. So there's talk of another special session coming maybe this week or next week. So I think I don't know. I haven't read the legislation that they did pass, because I like to go back to the legislative history. Like, I had a client who wanted to start a craft kitchen, which is basically like you can make stuff in your kitchen and sell it at farmers markets. And I went all the way through to the minutes. I read the minutes of the hearing, and I listened to the hearing where they talked about it. It was the pickle bill, if you remember, when Dina Titus was in the Nevada legislature.
I think, yeah, the pickle.
The pickle bill, because it had like a catchy name, and it was interesting. And so this is kind of indicative of how this, like, the risk you run in legislation is I'm listening to the legislators that are talking about, they're hearing the testimony, they're talking about, it's in the minutes. It was spoken about for maybe 20 minutes. And the person who wanted to there was like the Southern Nevada Health District, there was somebody from, you know, Washoe County Health District. And they said, look, we don't really need to spend all this much time on this. Maybe 50 people a year are going to want this license. So let's not, you know, have too much heartburn over it. Let's pass it. So what resulted is that there's lots of ambiguity in that legislation as far as like how you label and how you do this and how you do this. And so because they were sort of dismissive about it, and I swear in like 1 month, I had 3 people inquire as to how to start craft kitchens. And I'm like, not the only business attorney in this state. So those are the kinds of things like, oh, this is not going to, you know, impact that many people. We don't really have to spend that much time on it. And then you end up with this ambiguous legislation, and we're talking about food that could potentially make somebody sick. So that's the kind of stuff that, you know, you have to worry about. And that was a full legislative session, not even a special one. So I don't know.
Got it. And I know that at the federal level, there is definite talk about trying to push some liability legislation. You know, the word has been, you know, moved forward by the GOP. I've not seen or heard of anything from the Democratic side, and I'm not trying to get. It's not to be political about it, but that's just where some of the energy is being broadcasted out of. Do you see any legislation nationally on COVID liability coming down the pipe here soon?
Oh gosh, I feel like I'm not the right person to answer that question.
That's okay. But
yeah.
I'm
still getting my feet wet and educated on the Nevada process, but Washington is next. Figure that out next. I'm going to need a lot more scotch for that.
There you go. I'll bring a couple of. We'll go get the Costco bottles.
There you go.
And then, there was the CARES Act. I mean, that was sort of, I guess it was stimulus tranche 2. And the HEROES Act, it's been sort of sitting there for the Senate to pick up. Have you any thoughts or feelings on that, or do you think that that's going to kind of just sort of sit idle through the election?
On the CARES Act itself?
Well, I guess they're talking about the HEROES Act because a lot of these, like the unemployment programs, are getting ready to run out. Originally, the Senate, the House passed it. However, the Senate said, okay, we don't need it. However, there's a lot of rumblings that, hey, we might want to pick this thing up and just sort of solve our problem through the election.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of conversations, and I admittedly haven't been following them as closely, just trying to get my arms around what has been passed and what continues to change over and over again. But I know there's talk about, student loan forgiveness or abatement and using that as a tool to stimulate the economy. But then you have the unintended consequence that then the government does not, get those monies that it was, and even you have like this. I mean, it feels like a shit show.
No, absolutely. No question. And with which is great with yourself at both working at the chamber level, but also, the state affairs. I mean, as we like to say, government closest to the home, hopefully is the government we want. And it's awesome that you are engaged at these levels, representing, trying to bringing both a legal eye to it, but also, your business acumen to there too. So we're not just looking at you're not looking at things from one set of lenses.
Right.
So anything that kind of coming up or you're working on, Gina, that people need to know about?
Probably pay close attention to, if you have PPP money, pay close attention to the AICPA, which is I think it's the American Institute for Certified Public Accountants. They have proposed, and the federal government will listen to the AICPA because they have established themselves as a very reputable, credible organization. But they recently came out with a one-page PPP forgiveness application that they're waiting to be approved. Certain businesses will qualify. Well, prior to that, certain businesses would qualify depending on how much you got and whether you maintained employees or whether what your levels were for a streamlined PPP forgiveness application. So all of that is still up in the air. So I was trying not to procrastinate. This is where procrastinators really thrive, which is kind of nice. If you have not applied for PPP funds, that application period, at least as of the moment, I think, will close August 6th. So make sure that you find a banker. You do have to apply through a bank for that. Idle funds that is truly a loan. That application, I believe, is still open. The $10,000 advance or grant that they were talking about early on during, the onset of COVID is no longer a thing. So it's now $1,000 per employee that you may get that is forgivable or forgiven. It's a grant. I think those are the ones that are really on people's minds. And what I would love to have people do is, if you're comfortable leaving the house, if you don't have anybody in your household who's immunocompromised or anything, try to patronize small businesses because they're suffering quite a bit. But when you do go out, please wear a mask. It's not political at all. It's this virus does not discriminate. It's not red or blue or left or right or a donkey or an elephant. It's pretty scary. And I posted something on my Facebook, and it's like, here's the reasons I wear a mask, because I don't know if I'm sick and I don't want to get somebody else sick.
Right.
I don't know if somebody else has somebody else who's in their household that's sick. Like, I don't want to be a jerk. So it's a small inconvenience, especially after I've had coffee. It's not really exactly what I want to be experiencing in my day, but it's a small, sacrifice to make for the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know a lot of nations, like, you go to Japan even prior to COVID, if there were people ill, people wearing a mask is not a unusual sight. And, it's kind of the polite thing to do. Mm-hmm. And if we want, in being polite, and like you said, I would rather as frequent go to a business, go to a small business, contribute back to the economy, and if the sacrifice is wearing a mask and making sure we're trying to practice the safest standards we can to prevent the spread, that is much better than just sort of, okay, how much top ramen do I have left?
Yeah. And then the other thing I would ask is, like, not to just react to headlines. There's so much danger out there so I believe the downfall of our society is because of the 24-hour news cycle and social media. Yep. So there's misinformation that's posted in headlines, and people take the headline and they run with it, but just ask additional questions. Every time you see a headline and you want to react, ask 3 additional questions. Like, I don't know, who published it? What motivation do they have? And read it carefully. Like, read the article, like, read the whole article, read it carefully, consider who wrote it. Like, those are the kinds of things that I figured, like, as a lawyer, that's what I'm trained to do, but it's becoming so prevalent that people will just run with it, and then they're just vicious to each other based on, the 9 words in a headline.
Right.
And it's really, and it used to be, like, early in quarantine, it was kind of this, like, warm, fuzzy feeling where neighbors were shopping for each other, and we were all kind of watching out, and we were all, posting crazy videos of the stuff we were doing to keep ourselves occupied. And there was this feeling, even though there was, like, this scary thing out there and we're all quarantining, which is like a totally bizarre, like, Hollywood movie type thing to do, it all felt like there was, like, a sense of community, even though we weren't even seeing each other.
Yes.
That has completely blown apart, and I would love to try to get back to that somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're, absolutely, there's no question. We are a community, and we're, in all things too, with the hit that our economy has taken with regards to travel, with regards to convention spaces, with regards to restaurants and small businesses. If we look at what's going on across the nation, across the world, we're actually maintaining a fairly even strain, which is a great thing to show our evolution here in Las Vegas. And I know we have the ability to adapt and reinvent, and we will get through this. And as I like to joke about, rumors of our demise from the Great Recession were greatly exaggerated. So Gina, one last question I had, because I wanted to kind of touch a little bit on this too. How are you dealing with commercial businesses with regards to their needs with regards to lending, with regards to their leases, things of that nature? Because I speak to a lot of people residentially about forbearance with regards to leasing tenants and all that stuff. Any words of wisdoms or sort of things that you're kind of running into on the commercial side?
I mean, we did definitely at the very beginning have a ton of calls about the force majeure clauses in leases, which almost without exception would carve out, except for the requirement to pay your rent. These are the kinds of things that are force majeure. So I actually had Bobby write an article that we posted on the website where, like, just direct people to the website, like, don't even pay us to review your lease agreement, because we're going to tell you what is already in there.
Right.
So there was a lot of confusion around that. And I think both on the residential and commercial side, the moratorium on evictions was communicated, because I guess people were not asking those additional questions, as an abatement of rent. And it was not an abatement of rent. So we're starting to see, and one of my good friends is a property manager, so we're starting to see, okay, now, when that moratorium on evictions is lifted, we're going to have all these people who are evicted because they're not going to be able to make those, back rent payments. And it's going to be another, like, wave of, impact. And so, I mean, there's a lot of, it's just hard because nobody anticipates this, and anybody. And then, so the current chair of the chamber is Tom Burns, and he's a principal at Cragen and Pike, which is a long time, like since the 1900s,
absolutely.
Las Vegas insurance company or insurance brokerage. And he's like, these business interruption claims. He goes, if I tried to sell you pandemic insurance a year ago for as expensive as it was, you think you would have bought it? And we're like, well, no, who's going to buy pandemic insurance? But that's what everybody needed.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that we could not have anticipated. And it's really trying to be, just to be really informed about what the agreements are you're signing, understanding what the force majeure clause is, making sure that, just reading things carefully, I guess.
No,
is most important.
Absolutely. And Gina, credit to you, Bobby, and such for putting together a blog post about that to help people with some basic FAQs, and then if they need to, then they can engage you. So it's wonderful that you provide that guidance and resources on your website. Gina, anything else we didn't cover today you wanted to touch base on, or?
I don't think so. So what's the real estate market going to do, Don? Is it going up or down?
I've got my magic 8 ball over here. Well, I'm sure, as you know, you're a good friend of yours in real estate as well. I mean, the market. The market is. I would consider it overall a seller's market with select buying opportunities, but at the same time we have two competing. It's almost like we're dealing with Isaac Newton. We've got force moving in different directions. We've got the forces of low interest rates, high amount of equity, people's homes, and incentives, and then low inventory. So that's building demand, building value, and then on the opposite side is obviously COVID and unemployment. Mm-hmm. And even though that I think to some degree they cancel some of this out. Our market's still holding in there. I think too, we also still have a large lifeline out of California with regards to, 1 in 3 buyers we meet are Californians that are looking to have a different lifestyle, and they're coming in with a lot of equity. Mm-hmm. So I think,
and we're seeing a ton of them moving their businesses here. I mean, we've relocated dozens of California businesses to Nevada this year.
Absolutely. So you prove positive. So mm-hmm. So they're moving their corporate HQ. Now they're going to be moving their personal real estate. So I think that demand still bodes well. And in the long and short of it, when we were looking at 0809, we had an overcapacity. We had an oversupply of homes in general, and going into this year, nationally and even in Las Vegas, we didn't have enough homes.
Yeah.
So I think overall it's going to be. But to your point, like you said, reading things, we've got one economist saying home prices will be down 6% nationally and 20% in Las Vegas May next year, and then I've got another set of economists saying, okay, we're going to be up 4% next year.
Well, I watched a presentation, Jeremy Aguero, who's he's like the Mick Jagger of, I would be such a Jeremy Aguero fangirl, but he said 3 economists can agree if 2 of them are dead.
I love it.
That was pretty funny.
I love it. I think that's a good way to put it. And and it's to your point. I mean, I think I would say right now though too, if you have a large home that you do not need anymore, I think it's a great time to sell. So if you're a downsizer right now, or you don't need the space that you utilize, I think there's a market to that wasn't quite there this time last year, as people were kind of wanting to have smaller footprints. Mm-hmm. Now they need larger footprints for more children, because it looks like we're going to start the school session at home, so there'll be more dedicated space. And now instead of just one office, now homeowners need 2 offices. Yep. So, mm-hmm. So that's I think that demand's driving. So we do have some clients. I think I've spoken to. We actually have a listing. It looks like coming up in a few weeks in your humble little neighborhood.
Very exciting. Put somebody nice there.
Oh, it's a wonderful little place. Well, Gina, this has been great. I greatly appreciate you coming on today. I know it's, we kind of had this in the works for a couple of months now. I know you were really busy. Uh, I can't thank you enough for being a part, and I appreciate the value you bring to small businesses.
Of course, I appreciate you waiting on me and not shutting me out. This has been fun. It's great catching up with you, Don.
This has been great, and I might actually try to look for a check-in a little later as we see if our bingo card has some new things that we don't know about. But
I'm scared.
exactly. But if anyone has any questions, definitely do yourself a big favor. Go to bongiovilaw.com. There's some great information, some great resources, and then two, I encourage you before the lawsuit hits, if you want to be proactive, you want to kind of look to navigate, reach out to the Bongiovi law firm, because with their model being a little different than the traditional law firm, you in this ever-changing world, having legal counsel available, especially from Gina, who has an angle or a view from a business owner, marketer, previous in marketing and also involvement in the chamber and government affairs. It's in your best interest. So definitely reach out, take a look, and if you need some legal support there, reach out to Bongiovi Law. Gina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers to you today.
Cheers.
If anyone has any questions for Gina, do us a big favor. Put it down in the comment section. I'll get it over to Gina. She'll get an answer, and we'll get a comment to answer back to you. And on behalf of Colleen, my partner, who's out in the real estate world today, I'm Don Cramer with the Cramer Group at Urban Nest Realty, where more now than ever, your real estate experience matters. So thanks for tuning in today. We'll be here tomorrow, because Wednesday is our weekly recap on the Las Vegas housing market. So look forward to seeing you for episode 70 of Coffee with Cramer and Colleen. Till tomorrow, take care. Bye-bye.